Hey guys, so we're going to go over how to add OAuth to the backend. So if you don't know what OAuth is, here's an example. So I'm on Dropbox.com and they have two options for me to log in. I can either pass in an email and a password, or I can click the sign in with Google. And when I click on that, what will happen is I'll put in my credentials for Google and I am now logged into Dropbox. So OAuth is this part right here. So that would be OAuth with Google. What we're going to be doing is OAuth with Twitter. So it'll allow you to log in with your Twitter account, but the same thing will work for pretty much any company that does OAuth. So GitHub, Facebook, any of those places, the same method you can follow along with. So I said we're going to be using Twitter, and Twitter needs to know that we want to use them to log in to our site. And to do this, we have to create an app on their website. So go to apps.twitter.com and create an app. And when you do this, you have to put in some information. I just put a website as example.com because I don't really have a website. And then this part is important, the callback URL. I did localhost 4000/auth/twitter/callback. The stuff after 4000 you can change, and I'll talk about what you have to change further on if you want this to match up. This part right here is just where your server is running. So our server is running on localhost 4000, and you'd want to change this to your real server when you're doing this in production, and of course change the website as well. Now when you create your app, you can head over to settings, and it'll have two new settings down here, privacy policy and terms of service. I put example.com for both of those, and the reason why I added those is because we need to add another checkbox. Under permissions, we're going to click additional permissions, request email addresses. And the reason why we do this is because Twitter will now give us the email address of the user who is signed in, and that's important, and we'll see that later. Now to actually get this working, we're going to be using a library called Passport Twitter. It's really nice. It makes it super easy to get set up. And they have a lot of other OAuth solutions. I've done Passport Facebook before, and I'm sure they have Google and GitHub as well if you wanted to do those. So we're going to install this. I'm going to do yarn add, and we also need to install Passport as well. And then after that, we're going to install the types for this. And after we install the types, so the types for Passport and the types for Passport Twitter. Passport Twitter is just like the, I guess the module that we're using from Passport. So we also need to install the core module called Passport. So that's why we had to install that. And we're going to just follow the example that they have right here. So let's first import these. So import as Passport from Passport, and import from Passport Twitter. Now I originally was just going to do star as Passport Twitter here, but I found importing it like this worked better with the types, so I'm going to import it like so. Okay, so we're going to install, not install, but we're going to follow this pretty much to the T, and then just change a few things from the example. So I called it strategy, so I'm going to rename this to strategy here. And then I need to add two keys, the consumer key and the secret key. So when you sign up to create your Twitter application, there is a little tab here. Grab both of those keys from there, and you can either pass them as a string, or I am added mine to the environment file, so I can just do process.env as string, and pick them up that way. And this callback URL is the same thing that we supplied to our app. So I put localhost 4000/auth/twitter/callback. So you're going to want to put the same thing that you did here. And then the other thing is include email is going to be true. So we want to get the email of our user whenever we basically make the request. So it does not give you the email by default for some reason. Alright, here is what we want to do after we get the information from Twitter. We're going to talk about this more later. We can comment it out for now. and then we can grab these two. Now for us, we are not using app.get, we do server.express.get in both these places. And we also need to initialize passport. And I guess we should initialize after we do use. So server.express.use passport.initialize. Alright, so this right here is where the user is going to go to initiate things. So when I go to auth/Twitter, what's going to happen is it's going to redirect me to Twitter to put in my credentials, and then it's going to, what Twitter's going to do is call my server, and it's going to basically make a request to this callback, and then we can do whatever we want. So you'll notice this path right here matches our callback up here. That's important as well because we're telling Twitter where to send us after it's done requesting stuff. Now here we're saying where to redirect if it fails. For us, we don't really have a /login page right now. We could change this to like our front end, but we don't have one, so I'm just going to get rid of this setting. The other thing we need to do is we need to turn sessions off because we're not using sessions with Passport. We're kind of using them ourselves. And I'm just going to turn this function into something like that. Alright, so let's talk about what should happen here. So now when I do this, and what I would recommend is to just console log the profile. So profile basically has all the information for your account. I'm not going to actually console log this because it has basically all my information when I log in, but I'd recommend just doing this yourself and starting things up. So from here, stuff should work. So if you do yarn start, and then you go to this URL, so we call it /auth/Twitter. So we're going to go to localhost 4000 /auth/Twitter, and you can get this kicked off and see what happens. Now I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want to console log my profile. We're going to go further on and you'll see, I want you to do this and just see what the profile has. Now the two fields that we care about are the ID, and this is basically an ID, a Twitter ID. So we're going to say from profile. The other is a field called emails. Now emails, this was kind of interesting to me. So apparently you can have more than one email on Twitter, I guess, or I don't know if it's just for Twitter. I'm not sure how I want to really handle this, or if most users will have multiple emails. So what I was going to do is just destructure this and get the first email. Which, can I do it like that? I wanted to destructure it. Email is already, okay. Looks like I can, and then say, I don't know, A is equal to email. And does it let me? Type must have a symbol iterator method. I guess it doesn't like it. Okay. So emails, I think is, yep, it is, oh, it might be undefined. So if emails, we want to do stuff. Alright, so here's what we'd like to do. So if they have an email, we want to see if we have this email already in our database. Because sometimes a user will make a request, or not make a request, will log in, so make a login request with their email and password, and then, or they would register an account, and then they would then click on sign in with Twitter or sign in with Google, and we don't want to make two separate accounts, and we know they're the same account based off of the email. So we're going to search the user and try to find an email. The other thing is we want to see if this user already has signed in or if we need to create a user. So here is basically the ID, but this is a Twitter ID, which we're currently not storing. So what I want to do is add a new column to my database. So column, and this is just going to be a text column, and it's going to be Twitter ID, and that's going to be a string or null. So this is going to be nullable because not everyone is going to sign in with Twitter. So we can't have a Twitter ID for everyone. All right. So what I want to do is find the users. So if emails, we're going to say const email is equal to emails 0. And then emails has a value, which is what we really want. So emails dot value. Okay, so this is going to be the email. And then we want to search our database. And we want to search our user and say user.find. And we want to do something like this. So where, and we want to be like the Twitter ID is equal to ID, or the email is equal to email. So either that. So we want to see if, one, we can find the email or the Twitter ID if there's any users that exist. Now this, I believe, is anding them together. So where this Twitter ID exists and this email exists. And the only way to do or, at least from my knowledge, is to do with query builder. So with query builder, we get our connection from typeorm, and we're just going to copy this. And this allows us to do an or statement, which you'll see. And this is why I wanted to do it after the create typeorm connection. So now I can say const connection is equal to, when we create the connection up here, and I can use it. Here we need to, I guess, make this an async function. Hopefully we can make this an async function. We'll see if it crashes. But here we want to find a user. So we're going to wait a connection. We pass in a repository, which is the entity or table we're searching for. So we're searching the user table. And here we want to check where the Twitter ID. Now we have to pass in the Twitter ID in quotes like that, because that's how Postgres works. Whenever you have a capital letter and the name like that, you need to pass it with quote marks like that. So we're going to search for where the user Twitter ID is equal to the ID dot or where, and what or where says is find where this condition is true or where this condition is true. So the other condition we're going to check is where the email is equal to email, and we're going to get 1. So now we're going to either find where the person's email is or whether they have a Twitter ID. And whether they pass in an email or not, we still want to try to find the user. So what I'm going to do is move this outside. And what you're going to see me do is conditionally add this dot or where. So I'm going to say const query, and I'm going to say connection, all this stuff right here. Okay. So this query is not run until I call .get1. So what I can do is I can add things to it. So if I have an email from Twitter, we can get rid of this part right here. I'd like to add it to my query. So I'm going to say query dot or where. And at the bottom I can say const, and we can still say user.await query.get1. Okay, so now what happens is if they just have a Twitter ID, then we're going to search through our database and see if we have any users with that Twitter ID. If they have an email, we're going to get the first one, and we're going to also search if we can find any users in our database with that email. Either way, we're just getting 1, and we should really just find 1. So next, what we want to do is first if we find a user. So if there's not a user, what this means is this user needs to be registered, or it needs to be created, if you will. So we're going to say user.create. Now this is kind of interesting. So it does not have a password associated to this. So I think in our entity over here, this before insert might just crash. And we also, the password cannot be null here, or at least we didn't allow it to be null. So we need to change this to be nullable is true. Email we should sometimes will be null as well. So that's nullable is going to be true. And other than that, everything else should be the same. So, one other thing we need to check in our entity is because password can be null, we need to double check there is a password before we try hashing it before we insert. Alright, so now we're going to say user.create, passing in the Twitter ID, which is going to be the ID up here. And I guess if there is an email, so we're going to say let email. So email is equal to this, and we'll say email, and this might be undefined, and that's totally fine. So string or undefined. Or I guess we can initialize this to null. There we go. I thought we made it so you can, null is not assignable to type string or undefined. Okay, we'll just do undefined. Okay. Oh, that's just because my entity. So now that the password can be null, I have to change my types right here. So email and password are now possibly null because we assigned nullable here. So we need to update our TypeScript types. All right, so I think now I could give this the type of string or null. All right, that does work. So if we do have an email, we'll set it right here to be an email that is a string. Otherwise, we'll just pass in null here, and that's it. So we create the user. So we want to await this, and we need to make sure to call .save. Here, the other case, so I guess else if user.Twitter ID. So if the user does not have a Twitter ID, that means we found user by email. So this is the case where they have never clicked on sign in with Twitter, but they do have an account. So here what we want to do is we just want to say user.TwitterID is equal to ID, and then say user.save. So we just want to update our database to save this Twitter ID. And then the last case, so here we have a Twitter ID. So if we have a Twitter ID, then this is really a login. And there's not really anything we need to do. We can say if user.email is not equal to email. You know, I don't even want to do that. I don't think we have to do anything in this case. So else they have a Twitter ID, they're good. This is just a login attempt, and there's nothing to do. Either way, at the end here, we're going to have a user, and I should say let user. And we're going to create a user if there's not a user. Otherwise, we have a user, and we're going to call this callback. So we're not going to have an error, and we're going to pass in our user. We don't really actually need to pass in our user, just our user ID. So you're probably wondering what this callback and me passing in the user ID here is. Well, this callback calls this auth/Twitter/callback here, and here request.user, whatever I pass right here is going to be put on the request.user object. So what I can do is I can say request.user. I can just call it ID. So ID here. And now I have the ID of the current user. So for us, how we do it is we do request.session.userid is equal to that. Now it doesn't like it because maybe these things don't exist. So I'm just going to cast them because I know they are going to exist in this case. And then lastly, we want to redirect. So here we want to redirect to front end. Now we don't really have a front end right now, so we're just going to redirect to this place, I guess, and then we need to update this later. So I'm going to say add to do. So I think this code works. We do need to test this out. Looks like we possibly have a memory leak. Don't know what's going on there. I'm going to just restart this in a second. I did see that it didn't like these two things. So token and token secret, that is for OAuth, and for Twitter, we don't really need to use those things. Let's go over one last time how this code is working. So we set up a initialize of passport, and we set up a location where the user is supposed to go. So on our website, we would link to this location. And so when a user goes here, they're going to go to Twitter. And when they go to Twitter, what they're going to do is fill out their information, and then they're going to send that information back as a profile. So Twitter sends us the profile of that user. And when they send us that profile, we're going to get the ID and the email of that user. We're then going to build a query to find the user in our database. We're going to check whether we get an email. If we do get an email from Twitter, then we're going to query and see if that email is in our database. Otherwise, we're just going to try to find a user based on the Twitter ID. If we don't find a user with that Twitter ID, we create a new user with this Twitter ID. And then we do our callback, and we send it back over to here. We save that user ID in a session, which would log them in, and then we redirect to the front end, or in this case here. Now, if they come here and they have logged in before with Twitter, there's really nothing we need to do except for we already got the user. We just set the session, which logs them in, and then here is a merge. So this is merge account. That happens right there if the user has logged in before, but not with Twitter. All right, let's give this a try. So yarn start. I don't think really much is going to happen with this. Besides create a user in our database. But we'll see if we do get any errors. So what you want to do is go to localhost/auth/Twitter and request token failed. Okay, when you get this right here, this has happened to me before. I don't think there's any other error here. You want to go to your keys and access tokens and just regenerate both your keys. So for whatever reason, they sometimes expire. I don't know, they go bad. So I'm going to do that to my keys real quick. Okay, so I regenerated my keys and I put them back into my environment variables, and then I restarted the server, and I'm going to try going to auth/Twitter again. And here we go, and you'll notice how I am at Twitter for a second, and then it is redirecting me back to my local host. Looks like it's frozen. That means there's probably an error in my code. Now, what will probably happen for you also is you'll have to put in your credentials. I'm already logged in on this browser, so it automatically did it for me, and I didn't have to authorize. But let's take a look. So I just have a query error. And I guess maybe it didn't like that I was doing the Twitter ID. We definitely do not have a Twitter ID in my, I think in my ORM config, I just want to drop the schema. Drop schema, true. See if that works out a little bit better. I'm thinking it had trouble with the Twitter ID right here, that it couldn't find it, but I also could just have a syntax error somewhere or something else that's messing it up. And let's just go back to this. Okay, so it made it back here. I'm going to do this again, and hopefully it'll redirect. same promise, same error. Okay, so what it looks like is they already add quotation marks around the queries when we do a where statement, so we do not need to add these. If we were doing a raw statement using, say, just Postgres, then we would need to add those, but thanks to Typeworm, it handles it for us. So we can try this again, and nice. So you'll notice it redirected us back here. That means it went through the whole auth flow. Nothing happened here, but we can see it did go ahead and insert me into the database, and we can see here's my email right here that it inserted in. So awesome. It did create a user for me, and that is how OAuth works. And this is an example using Twitter, but you could also do this for pretty much any other company. Now, I'm not a huge fan of actually using this in production or using this with my stuff, so for further stuff I'm actually just going to remove this. I'll keep this in the branch, but when I actually build out some examples, I'm going to just remove this. I will show an example though of how to do this all inclusive with the front end, because there is like a couple pieces missing that I want to make sure that do work. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.